A pleasant good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a beautiful day, a beautiful Sunday morning. As Lionel Drew sing, easy like Sunday morning. I've been wanting to make some comments from the other day, and I've been thinking about what do I say to the people. And one of the things I believe that if you're going to say anything, you must try to be objective as possible, right? So what have been coming to my thoughts recently, I believe that as Jamaicans, we're a small nation, but we are among one of the smallest but most divided nation in smallest but most divided nations in the world. As Jamaicans, we don't see things objectively. We have been so much divided that we look at it from the point of political party. If a journalist writes a piece that criticizes another party or even writes an objective piece about the country or the state of the affairs of the country, he's been told that he represents the opposition, right? And if he writes a piece, you're either whatever you write about the country or say about the country, you're often described as being either a member of one of the two major political parties in Jamaica. So there's little or no room for objectivity in our country. So in the meanwhile, things go apart, as Ernest Pitt will say, as we fight one another for the power and the glory, Jah Kingdom goes to waste, and that's where we are. We have become a nation that we have moved away, right? This motto that we have, out of many, one people. Yes, it is our motto, but it does not represent that oneness, that great amount of people. Trust me, people of different ethnicities have contributed to our country, but for most of the point is that most of the non-blacks seem to be sitting on top of the chain, while the blacks are sitting at the lower end of the place, and the educated middle class blacks that are in the middle of the chain, that all the jobs in the public or the private sector, whether it's middle management or top management, the educated black class seem very much want and are eager to keep the present state of affairs or the present systems. So make no sense, they go to college, they get these degrees, they read about the struggles, they read about the history, but when they come out, they conform to the same culture and the same system that holds us down. So we are at a time when you see Jamaicans wearing Argentinian jerseys. Those jerseys are the biggest sellers since this World Cup competition. Yet still we know that Argentina is one of the most racist countries in the world, but we have embraced their players. Notice they don't talk about Pele anymore. It's all about that brown Maradona. And Maradona was this big drug addict. But we love our colored. We love whatever is non-white is good for us as Jamaicans. A country that was birthed out of slavery, that came out of colonialism, that came out of plantation slavery, where the vast majority of people now seem to have power to empower the classes, the non-black classes. When you talk like this, you have said you are racist. But I'm talking about the division, because people who come from other countries, a Chinaman come from a country, don't even speak a word of English, can get rich in no time in Jamaica. Because the banking institutions and the financial institutions back this kind of situation. They are in total, when you look at man can hold a whole chain of wholesale, they don't speak a word of English. Whether I'm a Chinese, I'm an Indian, I'm a Syrian or whatever. When I speak about this, I'm saying I'm racist. Right? Recently, I remember asking a question in a class already from a person who she's from Argentina, said, is your country a racist country? It was very rude. And you had black people supporting her. Let's talk about this situation about these third country nationals. Now, we already will know that from independence, every prime minister at Jamaica have ever had issues with the United States when it comes on to certain issues, when it comes to certain things. We remember in the 70s, right? When Michael Manley came to power, he came to power in 1972. And let's talk about what, because that was kind of my formative years. And during the 70s, when Michael Manley, he considered Jamaica, he said Jamaica is a non-aligned country. He had a philosophy of democratic socialism. He reached out the NHT, a lot of programs, Jamal, a lot of programs, instituted a lot of programs that for most poor people from coming down, that those things found traction. He found traction within the Rastafarian community. And so the whole connection, this whole Pan-Africanist approach, this whole democratic socialism approach did not find much favor with our counterparts overseas. It was then politically used as a tool to broadcast that Jamaica was in a form of relationship with communism, and it was considered a threat. Our sovereignty was not even considered. The government of that time was considered to be a threat to the interests of the bigger country. So Jamaica went through a lot during that 70s, and I can tell you that in spite of the visionary ideals of Michael Manley, many of those visions found no traction. Whatever it was wasn't executed properly, right? The country suffered because of that alliance with the Cuba, with Cuba under Fidel Castro. We still, as Caribbean country, formulated good relationships with Cuba, also with the United States. Jamaica as a country is a one love country. We get along well with just about every country. I really believe that Jamaica, it would be surprising to see a Jamaica in North Korea, right? We have the Jamaicans going to Russia, US. Jamaica seem to have a very large diaspora worldwide. So in the 70s, Jamaica suffered because of that impasse between the United States. We come back in the 80s when Edward Seaga was the Prime Minister of Jamaica. And during the 80s, it has been said that a lot of the ganja cultivation, the benefit, right? The ganja cultivation was destroyed. And not just the ganja cultivation was destroyed. Crops, cash crops were destroyed also in the whole that whole destruction, in that whole 80s situation where planes come, whatever plant was raided, ganja plant was raided, but good food crops. We lost a lot of good crops. To now, it's been a struggle to maintain, and I believe that Jamaica can feed itself, but Jamaica suffered in the 80s. From 80 to 89, despite some form of structural investment. That was something Jamaica had. Jamaica had with the United States, all of these agreements. Well, whether they will be detrimental, yes, there have been benefits, there have been detriments also, right? Because while the ganja was being destroyed, Jamaica became the perfect transshipment port for cocaine to go into the United States. So we had a problem. Right on to then. Them times that Jamaica looked progressive, we had our own fleet of planes, we have all of these things, and those planes were used, and because of that, I believe Air Jamaica was forced out of business because of those run-ins in the United States, right, with the drugs and all of that, history. If we go back and read some of these history books, I read a Laura Gunn's once there's a book called The Mean But Empowered. I read Michael Manley's Struggle in the Periphery, and we can read about the structural adjustment in Jamaica. So we have been a nation that have gone through a lot of stuff. Now fast forward to 2010, when order was come that came from the United States, that a very popular figure allegedly, because we don't know for a fact what we get in the media, right? When that warrant came, the country was on another chalk line again. It resulted in intervention in Western Kingston. you know, our poorer eras, and a lot of poor people died and suffered because of that, right? Which resulted in the execution of the warrant, right, of a famous Don in Jamaica, or a businessman. Let's call it a famous businessman that allegations were made again that he was involved, right? We will never know. That's a state thing, that what we read, because we don't get everything from the media, so we have to go off what we read, right? But Jamaica suffered because of that. People started losing visas and all of that. Prime Minister had to resign. The Prime Minister of that time had to resign to give way for the present leader that we have. Knowing the kind of relationship, it's dependent on the kind of government that is in Washington at the time. It's either you go forward, it's either you try to play ball, it's either you try to be diplomatic. Now that Jamaica, the first thing we had to do, the detriment came in our hospital system, where the Cuban doctors had to leave. And I don't know if they were middle ground for some to stay, but our health system, it would have been detrimental to a health system that contracted doctors from Cuba had to leave. We still have challenges. Now the time has come now for Jamaica again. It's now the Prime Minister's turn, it's Jamaica's turn again. What do we do in a situation where a demand like this is made, in an environment like this? Do we sit and blame? Instead of standing up for our rights, do we stand up against and say, well, do we find a political to blame somebody and say, you are the one for the cause of this, you are not doing this and you are not doing that? Yet still we know what the reactions would be were Jamaica to say, look here, this is what we're going to do. If Jamaica was to take a firm principle stand, sometimes it's not going to be even, it is going to, we're in a kind of situation we have to decide where is our soul? What do we stand for now? We can't just say it's the government alone, because we as a people are not unified. We are divided. We don't like this. What do? We don't have nuclear power. We don't have arms. We're not equipped like that to take up any major military. If there's a military proposition, we cannot take that. We cannot go that route. We're having problems. So what do? Do we sit and do we blame and say the government, or we do look at it and this is something that is far bigger than us and only God and time will deal with this? Do we stand up for our rights? How do we stand up for our rights? How do we send a clear message that we're a sovereign country? Those are the questions that we need to be asking. Those are the solutions that we need to be seeking as Jamaican. Instead of going out on a political tangent, look at us as a people. When I see we're wearing Argentinian jerseys, we're cheering for white European teams more than our team. We cheer for our own Caribbean and African teams, right? When are we going to get to the point as black people say we are the majority in the country, right? But we're not going to do like South Africa. But we have to recognize that there's a chasm between opportunities in Jamaica. All right, let me look again at this PEP situation at Ascot Primary School. The principal, to his credit, raised the bar and set up a standard and said, you don't graduate if you don't get good grades at PEP, wanting to mean that he was following a trajectory that was set out. Education for the most part in Jamaica is classist. Not every child is going to go to a traditional high school in Jamaica. We need to get rid of this colonial legacy of traditional high schools that sound like an English privilege. A boys' school, that sounds like English privilege, where young men were sent off to boarding schools or to certain privileged institution to call a certain class of people. Or it's like a classist instructor. Every school should be a school equipped with just about the very best thing to provide education for the children. So this argument about, number one, when I was leaving high school, we never had no graduation in those times. You get a certificate or, you left school, you go on to my next school. But your parents are making a lot of, as if not graduating is the end of their child's educational aspirations. And they blame the school. And for what? A graduation? Graduation from primary school? I think that is at the discretion of the school. But I believe that to separate children, it has something about it. But it tells me that if you go to college and there's a graduation and you didn't qualify, you didn't get that degree, do you expect to graduate? Do you think that school would be unfair to allow you not to graduate from the institution, even though you have not completed the protocols or you have not met the standards that is required to graduate? And those are the questions. But there's another review that we're going to do, right, that we need to do. But I said before,